welcome to the Sugar and Spikes podcast, a podcast for entrepreneurs, side hustlers, and anyone ready to uplevel their career in their own damn way. I'm Dez. I'm a life coach for women who get that having it all sometimes means having to balance the good and the bad, the sugar and the spikes, and all the in-between.
And I'm Tammy. I'm a therapist, and I'm all about helping as many people as possible to build awareness and make meaningful changes in their lives. I'm also dedicated to diversity and inclusion and increasing access to mental health care.
Between the two of us, we have 4 master's degrees and thousands of hours helping people develop balance, confidence, and clarity on their terms. So let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Sugar and Spikes podcast. I'm Dez.
And I'm Tammy.
And today we are continuing our mental health series, talking about mental health and entrepreneurship. And we have another guest, and I'm so excited to have this lovely lady on. Eliz Love is joining us, and I heard her speak at the Badassery book launch, and I knew she had to come on, share her story about mental health. And Lauren, why don't you just give us some basic background info? Who are you? What do you do? All that fun stuff.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so super pumped to be here. My backstory, it's so funny. I always kind of ask people, like, which one do you want? Because there's like all these different pieces of my journey. And I know so many of us feel that way. For me, I am an entrepreneur. I'm a life and business coach, and I mainly focus on teaching women how to scale their businesses to the multiple 6-figure level. And it's so weird how I got here, you guys. Like, I think it's just really funny to look back and remember those days where I quit my corporate job in 2015 and was like, I'm going to just be a blogger and share my fucked up life and all of the things that I've been through. And I'm going to make money doing it. Like, that was my plan. I had just this roller coaster life of trauma, mental health issues, being diagnosed with multiple mental illnesses. And when I found my ground, my footing, and I had done all this healing, I realized I really wanted to help other people overcome those things as well. So that's how I shifted into the entrepreneur space. I really had no intention of being a coach. I really just wanted to be one of those people that sits behind a desk, takes pretty pictures, puts them on their Instagram, and makes money off of ads. Like, that was the basic plan. And then slowly over time, as I started to share those things about my life and what I had been through, and we could certainly talk about that Pandora's box. But like, after that process, it was like so many people were, I guess, inspired by that. And they were reaching out saying, well, how did you get to where you are now? If all of these things happened to you, I want to heal too. And that's how I shifted into life coaching. Shortly after that, I started getting people saying, well, how did you grow a business? I want to do that too. So my brand and my company name, What is Perfection LLC, eventually shifted into where we are now, which is the Badass Business Babe Tribe, teaching women how to really be the best version of themselves so they can kick ass in their businesses.
Awesome. Thanks. You mentioned kind of dealing with some mental health issues and everything. Were those pieces that you experienced before? It sounded like they were pieces you experienced before the entrepreneurship phase, correct?
Oh, way before. I've experienced them my whole life. I think so many women can remember those times when they were like teenagers and, maybe you knew someone in school that was cutting themselves or that just had like a really depressed energy about them. And, being a teenager growing up, you experience these waves of emotions, right? These ups and downs. But I had a sexual assault happen at a really young age. And that trauma, I believe, was what created this sort of patterned brainwave, like in my mind. I don't even know how to explain this, but it was like, suddenly the rose-colored glasses were removed about being a kid. And I was this young teenager, like 13, 14, that felt like she was an adult, having experienced something really traumatic, and suppressing all of that and hiding all of that. That was when I think my body really started to trigger off those warning signs of like, hey, there's some stress and trauma here that has not been dealt with. So I went through depression. I went through some cutting series and really felt like a misunderstood kid because nobody knew what had happened. And then in my freshman year of college, I experienced a rape. I was a rape victim, and that alone suddenly opened up everything that I had never dealt with. It was like all this, hey, remember when you were a kid kind of experience. And I had these nightmares and these terrible thoughts, and ended up attempting suicide. So my first year of college, while everyone was at spring break, I was in a psychiatric institution, an inpatient program, trying to get my shit together. And doctors diagnosed me as bipolar, borderline personality disorder. There was something else in there too, but I can't remember. But I've been through so many diagnoses. But at the root of it, it was trauma that I had never dealt with. It was pain. It was this feeling of not being able to trust and living in fear. And all of that trauma was something that once I dealt with that, the mental health issues started to subside. Not to say that they're not there. I'll always be a woman who struggles with a mental health issue, but I was able to cope with those things in a much better way because I was facing the cause, not just the symptom.
Mm-hmm. What an inspirational story. I mean, you've been through so much, and even just what you shared here, and I read some on your blog too. What has really helped you to heal from that trauma? I know you said you were able to deal with it. If you are comfortable talking about that at all, or if it's too personal, you can tell me that too.
No. I love it. I here's the thing, people are almost sometimes scared to ask these questions, but I think they're really important, right? Because if I show up and talk about things on a surface level, that doesn't help anybody. But I know that if I go really deep and just tell the real deal of what has happened, there are women out there who are going to hear that and they're going to go, oh my God, wait, maybe there's hope for me. So for me, I think what I experienced was being told that I had a mental illness. So my sadness, my overwhelm, my anxiety, my ups and downs, my drug use as a teenager, all of that was, well, she has a mental health problem. And so I thought that the key to all of this, to removing all of this pain, to getting rid of all of the upset, was to take a pill. And so being diagnosed was really easy to get doctors to give you what you thought you needed. And there's this really common pattern here, especially in New York, where it's like there are doctor feel goods, right? These feel good doctors that are just like, oh, here's a pill. You have a problem. Here, it's solved. So I masked a lot of the feelings and suppressed a lot of the issues for, I would say, a decade. It was probably around the age of 25 that I realized I hadn't really felt anything in my life because I was numbing myself with antidepressants, antipsychotics, Adderall, Xanax, all of these medications that were supposed to be the secret to suddenly feeling happy. I wasn't feeling happy. I was just feeling numb, right? So I guess just to bring it back to your question, I had to remove all of that to feel and experience things that I had not felt and experienced in a really long time. And when I say remove all that, I mean remove all of that, like to stop drinking alcohol. And I went through a period of sobriety when I came off of medication. And then just recently, I'm 90 days sober because I chose to remove it for health reasons. But I was abusing those prescriptions and what I was prescribing myself, right? So the first step was to really remove all of that. And then I went on this journey of healing myself completely, going down the rabbit hole of personal development, studying people like Louise Hay and Tony Robbins and Wayne Dyer, Gabby Bernstein, and just opening up this toolbox that I didn't even know existed to realize that if I wanted to be happy, I had the ability to control that. I wasn't a victim. So I had to let go of the identity that I gave myself, which was I'm a mentally ill person and I'm a rape victim. And I had to switch into claiming a new identity and decide that I wanted to be someone who was worth way more than that. And that was a decision that only I could make. But the minute I made it, I raised my standards. My life started to change. I took action, and slowly but surely, I did away with all of that old bullshit and I was able to heal.
Wow. I mean, your story is so empowering, and you talk about these ways of healing and transforming yourself that were really empowering to you personally. And I think you bring up a really good point, is that often when we've experienced terrible things in our lives and we are trying to cope with them the best we can, oftentimes what we are coping with is really just compounding the problem.
100%.
Yeah. And so what you are able to do is to be able to recognize that and say, I really need help, and kind of go on this journey of trying to figure out how you could heal rather than just mask. And that's so important. I mean, that's what I do in my work all the time. And so I just love to hear that you were able to go on that journey and be successful. And I see it all throughout your work too.
Thank you. Yeah. And don't get me wrong. Like, I think there are still parts of my life that, and I'll be fully transparent with you, that whole narrative I just shared, that all happened way before I quit my job and became a coach. All of that I just shared with you was prior to stepping into the entrepreneur space. But as an entrepreneur who's not taking any medication, I've been medication free now for, I think, over 4 years. And I was told by doctors I was going to be on medication my whole fucking life. So, I had to do a lot of work around, the symptoms and what happens when I don't have enough high fat in my diet, or what happens when I don't take care of my body with meditation and exercise, or, what happens if I don't sleep consistently enough for a series of days. There are certain triggers in my lifestyle and my pattern and my behavior of living that need to be there to create a solid, healthy foundation for myself. But I thought for the longest time it was just to take a pill, and that didn't do anything.
Yeah. I mean, I think you speak so well about the importance of like whole body wellness, like mind, body, spirit, right? And that we can't just get rid of symptoms, but we have to kind of transform in order to correct all those things that may be contributing, because it's really not just like, here's this one thing that's wrong, right? It's not like that. And so you really talk, and it takes work. I love that you said that it is work, and there are days when it's exhausting.
Yeah. And I still have them, right? Like I will live with being someone who, quote unquote, struggles with depression for the rest of my life. But I have to give myself the grace of knowing that that's okay. That doesn't make me not capable of living the life that I want to live. It doesn't make me a victim. It's one of my greatest gifts, because I have the ability to be compassionate with people when they're going through struggles. If you can't be compassionate with others and relatable and just be on that ground level and be like, yeah, shit's hard sometimes, how could you possibly create change?
Yeah, I love that piece about like continuing to be someone who like struggles with like, not in that it is like a form of like your identity or something, but one thing that it made me think about is there are so many of these like teachers that are out there that are just like, we'll just do it. Like, it doesn't matter like how shitty you feel. It doesn't matter what's going on. Like those pieces don't matter. Just make the content, do the thing, close the sale, whatever your business is, like as an entrepreneur, like they make it sound so simple. And I'm interested in your experience. Like, how have you kind of learned to navigate those times where maybe, I don't know, can we call it like a flare up or something? Where it isn't as simple as like society would really have you think.
Yeah. So I think the first piece of this puzzle is giving yourself permission to not be perfect. And there's this really easy trap that we fall into where we see other entrepreneurs on their social media feeds, and we think that everyone has their shit together 95% of the time, when in reality, it's probably like 70-30. I mean, sometimes 50-50, depending on what place you are, in your journey. But I think for me, in the beginning of entrepreneurship, I would look at people and say, fuck, they are so on all the time. They are always showing up. And how do they post all these pictures? And oh my God, their content, why is their content always so good? And that was a trap that was always there to fall into. But when you're having a depression flare up, so to speak, man, is that like, that's the first place your brain goes, that you just like fall down that rabbit hole where you feel like shit. And then you feel like even more shit because you're comparing yourself to these other people. So I think like right out of the gate, the biggest piece of this was just understanding that when I was having a bad day, or when I was having a week that I needed off, or even sometimes 2 weeks, depending on where I was, that wasn't just okay, but that was great. It was great. Like when you look at the way that the earth is created, right? We don't have fall harvest season every fucking month of the year. Like that's not how our universe works. That's not how the world works. When you look at the way that bears go into hibernation, or how there's like mating seasons at certain times of the year, there's a creation ebb and flow process to our world. So why, if this is the world we live in, why are we as humans any different? Why are we holding ourselves to a different standard where we always have to be on point, and we always have to sell, and we always have to close, and we always have to be go, go, go? We're not robots, right? We live in a technologically driven world, but we are not robots. We need that time to ground ourselves and get back to center. And when I gave myself that grace, when I had a flare up and was just like, okay, it's flare up time. Like I'm going to spend a week journaling and watching reruns of Bob's Burgers. And that's cool. Like I'm a human, like I'm going to do these like very normal things that humans do. When I just gave myself that, suddenly that space didn't feel as painful, and it actually felt like hibernation or recovery rather than just failure. And I still do that. I still have weeks where I'm like, you know what, I need to ground myself. Like, it's so funny we're having this podcast episode and I'm talking so much to you guys, but I'm really passionate about this. It's so funny we're having this recording now because this is one of those weeks for me. This is a week where I'm in my fog and I'm having ups and downs and I'm not feeling as centered as I usually do. And that's okay, right? Like I can give myself that grace, and I don't need to stop the whole entire world to hide. I can just be comfortable with the fact that I'm not feeling my best, and that's okay.
Definitely. Give yourself permission to feel all those things and to say, what can I show up for? What can I not show up for?
Oh, well, that's the other part too, right? Like you have to be super selective about where you spend your time. That's something that I've most recently learned how to step into. Like I love my friend Natalie Bright on Instagram. If you don't go follow her, but I interviewed her on the Badass Business podcast. And one of the things she said was, she just tells people, I'm just not available for that. Like if there's something that she doesn't want to do, if there's something that doesn't feel aligned, she doesn't say yes to everything. And, there's a point in your entrepreneur journey where you say yes to everything because you're really eager and excited. And then there's a point where you go, you know what, my mental health, like I'm not available for that. I need to take care of myself. And that's been a huge shift.
Yeah. So it's really all about learning and transforming and working with circumstances rather than kind of trying to pretend they aren't there or kind of trying to work against them, but to say, you know what, this is okay. I'm okay. And this is what I'm going to commit to right now. And this is what's going to wait.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah.
Well, and the idea of like being unavailable, like I love that sentiment. That's one of my go-tos in terms of like mantras and kind of self-care views. I think like I'm unavailable for, and then insert whatever, like it's naturally empowering. And if you're in a moment of depression or anxiety or anything like that, it's very easy and reasonable to feel completely like disempowered, because it's not a great moment. Those feelings aren't good. But then like re-empowering yourself by saying, I'm not available for all of the noise right now because of where I am. Like that's kind of an immediate action step in and of itself to start feeling better.
Yeah. I mean, some of the most powerful decisions we can make are what we focus on. You know, we have a choice. What are you going to focus on? That's a decision that you make every day. And then what meaning do you give it? And that's something that, oh my God, like I could look at focusing on the fact that I'm so uncomfortable or I'm so overwhelmed or I'm so depressed or I have all this work to do. But if I give that a meaning, if I choose to give it a meaning, that means, well, you're just a piece of shit because you never have your stuff together, or, you know, see, you're a failure. You can't create success because you have this problem. You know, how disempowering is that? And then with your schedule, if you look at your schedule and you feel like you're a slave to your business, you know, what are you focusing on? And what meaning do you give it? And then what are you going to do about it? And so you have action steps you can take. You can say no to shit that doesn't light you up. I mean, you're not a slave to your business. Nobody picked entrepreneurship so that they could bow down and say yes to everything. That's not the whole point of being an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are about freedom and opportunity and joy. So yeah, absolutely. I love that.
I love that you bring up that entrepreneurship, like people go into entrepreneurship for freedom. And then you also said like, but then you end up like a slave to your business. I was reading your blog post about like, hey, I just stepped away and I realized, nope. And I like took Facebook off my phone and all of this stuff. And I'm like, you know, I think people read that and they're like, wow, she's so brave and she's still here and she's still doing fine. So maybe I can do that too. And it gives them the courage to kind of walk forward and find the freedom that they went into entrepreneurship for in the first place.
Yeah, 100%. We lose sight of that so often, right? Because we get wrapped up in chasing the significance or the financial freedom or the big shiny objects of success, quote unquote. And it's just like, you know, at the end of the day, this is about a feeling, an emotion, an energy that you're trying to create in your life. And you have to be more focused on that than all the shiny objects.
Yeah, absolutely.
One question I had, and this is shifting gears. I have like three things that I'm thinking about. So sorry if I'm a bit.
No, it's cool. Love it.
But one question, going back to kind of like the core mental health piece really quick, because I want to make sure that I ask this question, is I'm a firm believer in like all of the things kind of happen for a reason, and you know the experiences we go through teach us things. And speaking as someone that's dealt with mental health issues myself, I know that one of my perspectives going into entrepreneurship was kind of like, well, who am I to do that? Like, I'm so like fucked up, blah, 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 like all of that stuff. But then I noticed that I learned some things from having gone through those situations. Like if I hadn't, I wouldn't be the entrepreneur I am. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak to a couple key lessons that maybe you see looking back now where maybe it really was for the best. And maybe it's just like emotions that like you learn to deal with or something like that. I don't know if that question makes sense.
No, I think it kind of does. There's like a couple of different pieces in here that I love that you brought up because it's so important. So, you know, I felt very insignificant growing up in my life, right? Like I had parents who didn't really give me what I needed. They loved me, but they didn't meet my own personal needs. I was very different than my parents. They were raised by immigrants and taught to play safe, get good jobs and all that. And grew up in a really conservative household. So for me, I had to do a lot of work when I stepped into entrepreneurship with owning my brilliance, because all of us have it. And I had to stop thinking that I didn't. And that took a lot of work for me. You know, it's funny. Part of the reason I wanted to be a blogger and share my fucked up life was because right around the time I had attempted suicide, I found the book by James Fry called A Million Little Pieces. I don't know if you've heard of this book before.
Yeah.
It is the very first memoir I ever read. And I I can't tell you, like that book, I remember reading it and I was like, oh my God, this guy's life is so fucked up and he doesn't care that other people know. Like that was the coolest piece of this to me. And I read it like 4 times because I was fascinated by the fact that he wasn't living ashamed of what he'd been through. And I was raised by a mother who, man, like when I came out of the psych ward, her first words out of her mouth were like, don't tell anybody about this. I mean, there was such a conditioning for me of like shame around who you were and what you went through. And because of that shame, I felt this craving and this hunger and this desire to just let it all out and just be me. Like, who gives a shit, guys? Everyone, this is what I've been through. And I wanted to do that so badly for myself. And it wasn't ever from this space of, well, who am I to do it, right? Like that never really came up for me because my blog, when I started, was all about, I needed to do this for me. Like I needed to be a woman who could show up and talk about my rape, my suicide attempt, my trauma, my abusive ex-husband. Like I needed to be able to just talk about all of that and feel great with who I was, right? And like having that be enough. So I think when people step out into the space of trying to do something incredible with their lives, when they're doing it from this space of wanting to be significant and wanting to get recognized, it's almost like the pressure is so high. And that's when we go into that space of, well, who am I to do this? But when you're doing it for other reasons, right? When you're not doing it for significance and you're doing it because it's therapeutic or it's healing or it fuels your creative fire or it makes you feel inspired, like whatever it is that it's motivating you, when you choose to focus more on that, you're safe enough to press those buttons and push the limits and do things that many other people don't feel like make any sense. But you go after that stuff because your soul is calling you to do it, not because you're trying to get recognition or acknowledgement. And I'll be fair, I did a lot of that on my journey of trying to get the recognition and the likes and the attention and the Facebook shares, and none of that really served me because at the end of the day, I wanted to do this because it just lit me up and that was enough.
Well, yeah, because people connect with that authenticity. They connect with that realness, that thread in everything that you do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I mean, it's important, right? Because like, why are you doing things? Like, did Steve Jobs go after making the iPhone and the computer and everything that he did and being like, I'm going to be famous and get recognized and be so successful? I mean, you know, I read his biography and I don't really think that was the focus. I think the focus was like being innovative and making a huge change in the world and contributing with a really inspiring vision, right? Like, and that was what he focused on. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm just thinking about everything you said. I'm just kind of taking it all in and. Yeah. So that's my silence.
No, I love it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it.
I love it. I'm over here. I'm like, oh, let's just like take a moment to pause. Like, yeah. Okay, I'll roll with it. Cool. Open silence.
Perfect.
All right.
Yeah, and Lauren, just in total transparency on my side, I have been like, I'm on a crazy travel schedule right now, so my eyes are like burning and everything, so I apologize if
your eyes are burning and you're apologizing to me. I mean, that sounds pretty terrible. Like, oh my God, girl. Oh, man.
Trying to keep my brain like together. No, I live in Indiana, and I've been flying to Austin Monday through Thursday every week.
Why?
And then I have a corporate client that I'm working with that's based in Austin.
It's a lot of work, girl.
Well, and my flights have just been so nuts. Like last Thursday took me 23 hours to get home, and Monday morning my flight was canceled. And yesterday we were circling like Dallas, because I have a connection in Dallas. We were circling Dallas for 2.5 hours, and they flew back to Austin. And I was like, nope, I'm going to California. So I landed at like 3 a.m. on the time zone that like I'm used to working in, and was up at like 8. And yeah, so that's my
Sounds
silence.
terrible.
So,
that's like a mental health nightmare for me. I would be like crying my eyes out.
I did that last week. I was like at the airport and I called my husband and I was just like, I'm going to need you to come get me from Chicago. But I think, kind of going from that, like there still like is a drive, right, to make things happen, I think it's interesting, and this ties back to like my very first question really of there are times when like things have to be done, but then at the same time, like I'll be honest, I was juggling around with like, do I cancel, do I reschedule, what do I do today, because like I respect your time and getting you on the books. Like we've had this booked for like a couple months, and then it's like, well, what is professional versus what is like what's taking care of myself. And as an entrepreneur, like there's no easy answer. And I think like I just kind of want to put that out there, like in podcast land, there's no right or wrong.
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced those times where like if you were in corporate, there would be a very clear answer of, well, here's the procedure, so I'm going to do this because that's the book, and kind of wishing for that?
Oh, totally. I mean, I don't wish for it, but I totally have times where I had to kind of make up my own rules. I mean, that's part of, here's the deal. And this is something I teach a lot of girls who come into my programs. I'm not an entrepreneur, right? I call myself that because that's what 90% of us like to call ourselves. But at the end of the day, I'm actually an artist. There's a very big difference between how those things are in our, if we look at these as archetypes, there's the artist, there's the entrepreneur, there's the business person, right? The manager, so to speak. And so these archetypes, when you start your business, are something that you need to have every part of. You need to be the entrepreneur because you're taking big leaps and you're being crazy wild and doing things that, your regular human friends are like, what the fuck are you doing? You're quitting your job. Like, that's nuts. And then there's the manager, right? Which is the business professional who knows how to hire people and how to manage people and run a show and operate a business and keeps track of numbers. And you have to do that because you don't really make enough money to not do it. And then there's the artist, and the artist is the person who is creative and inspired and operates out of intuition and doesn't really operate out of logic and does things because it creatively drives them. So in the beginning of my business, I thought that if I wasn't working 12-hour days and I wasn't hustle, go, 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 that I was a failure. But the artist in me needs breaks, needs downtimes. This is why, like, if I have a week I have to take off and mail it in and not give 150%, I'm actually excited about that because I know that once that week is over, I'm going to have the most brilliant creative ideas. Shit is going to get wild. My business is going to boom. Like, I just know that's what happens, right? Every time I take a break to follow it is this big success. But just to go back to your question and this idea of like knowing what to do and what not to do, as the artist, there are days where I don't want to work and I have to cancel appointments, or I don't want to show up on a Facebook Live and I have to kind of mail that in. And not knowing what to do, it's a case-by-case basis. And that's the beauty of it, right? Like if I have something scheduled that doesn't light me up, and I'm not looking forward to it, I'm going to cancel it. If I have clients who really need my help and I adore and I love serving, I'm going to show up for them because I can't judge how I show up. Maybe I need to show up at a 20, 50% energy level for them because maybe that's actually what they need too. Maybe they need to slow down and be comfortable with where they're at. And never judging myself, I think, has been a really big help in that. But I cancel appointments. I think our first time we had this scheduled, I think I had to reschedule because I was in that space of like not being lit up and excited. And, that's okay to do that. It's okay to take those breaks and disconnect. And it wasn't a reflection on you guys. It was just like shit was going on in my life at the time.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And I had to slow down. when we got married, we went on a 3-week trip to Sedona, Arizona, and Hawaii. We went to Maui and we went to Kauai. And I didn't tell my husband until we got to Sedona, and he looked at my schedule, but I still had all my fucking calls planned. I was like, no big deal. You know, the time difference, I'll do it. It'll be 4:00 in the morning. I'll just run down to the lobby and like do these coaching calls. No problem.
Oh my God.
He's like, you're fucking crazy. Like, that is not happening. Cancel them all now. And I cried so hard. I was like, my clients are going to be so upset and everything's going to fall apart. And I was just like having this meltdown, but man, you got to give up control. Your business is not about you, right? It's about the work you do in the world. And if you need to, refill your tank, then go fucking do it. I mean, that's the beauty of what we get to do every day, is that we can put ourselves, as priority and fill our cup when we need to.
Yeah. And I think you bring up another good point, which you have so many good points. But you bring up another good point, which is it's you telling yourself that they're going to be pissed, the world's going to fall apart, but that's you saying that. That's not like objectively what's going on, right? So if you can quiet that voice long enough to take the step, even if it's your husband saying, you're going to cancel, like, this is ridiculous, then you actually take the step and you're like, oh, the world didn't fall apart. My clients aren't pissed. Okay, maybe I can do this again.
Yeah. Oh my God. And it's so true. It's like, there was a point, I remember celebrating my first $10,000 month as a coach. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so rich. Like, I thought it was like the biggest thing ever. And then I was like, oh my God, what if this isn't duplicatable? Like, that was the initial thought, was like, celebrate for like 2 seconds and then freak out for like 4 days, right? Like, that was literally the process, because I was so afraid of everything falling apart. And even when I hit, the 20K and the 30K and I kept going, I still had this fear of like, is this actually real life, or is this a fluke? Or, maybe I have to show up more. And I created all this fear in my head around keeping everything together. And man, that fear, that primal brain that's like just trying to keep.
Sorry.
Oh my God, it's so funny. That's amazing.
Yeah, would you believe that's the first time that's ever happened?
That's amazing, though.
Like,
it's
our
so cool.
60 episodes.
It's perfect. But yes, our primal brain tries to keep us safe all of the time, and it is bullshit. Your brain doesn't want to make you happy. That's not your brain's job. Your brain is just to keep you safe. Like, that's literally, it's like back to the days of hunting the lions. Like, you just want to be safe. So of course, like, all of these bullshit fears come up, but just to recognize it doesn't mean you should stop. It just means that you got to keep going and learn how to have a bit more courage.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate so much you sharing your story.
Thank you. Yeah, it was such an honor for me to be on this show, you guys. Like I said before we started recording, this is so important, just to have that transparency and openness about mental health and entrepreneurship and the journey of balancing it all. Yeah, so many women need this. So thank you. It was an honor to be here.
Thanks. If folks don't know where to find you, where can they find you all across the interwebs?
Yeah, so I would say for all of the entrepreneurs out there who are looking for some free business guidance, right? Like, being in that place of just not knowing what next steps to take, or even looking for a tribe, you can come to Facebook and search Badass Business Babes on Facebook. There's a community I run where I do free live trainings in there. So super helpful for anyone out there who's just looking to get some guidance or even personal development coaching. And then in Instagram land, I am at Badass Business Babe. So you can come check me out there.
Perfect. Thank you, Lauren. Thanks again. This has been really great. And
thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the Sugar and Spikes podcast. If you guys like what we're doing, please subscribe, leave a rating, share it with your friends. It would mean the world to us. If you're not a huge fan of what we're doing, maybe share it with someone you think may like it. If you want to keep up to date on all of the Sugar and Spike shenanigans, get the behind-the-scenes tour of life and business as a millennial female entrepreneur, then follow me across all the social medias. I'm Dez W, Ms. MBA, DEZW, MBA, across all the platforms, your Facebooks, your Twitters, your Instagrams. I'm there, same name. And don't forget, if you're ready to rise up as a legendary leader, you know you are, then head on over to DesireeW.com and sign up for the free 5-day Legendary Leadership Challenge. Also, I want to thank Forget the Whale for use of their song Move Along as our theme music. And guys, remember to stay unavailable for fuckery.